In our fast-paced modern world, where productivity and achievement often take precedence over personal well-being, the concept of self-love can feel elusive, even selfish. Many of us have been conditioned to believe that constant self-criticism is the path to improvement, that pushing ourselves beyond our limits is a virtue, and that putting ourselves last is a sign of character. Yet, this mindset leads not to excellence, but to burnout, anxiety, and disconnection from our authentic selves. This is where an unexpected alliance of ancient wisdom and modern mindfulness offers profound guidance. Stoicism, often misunderstood as promoting emotional detachment, actually teaches us to distinguish between what we can and cannot control, to find tranquility in acceptance, and to cultivate virtue through intentional living. Mindfulness, meanwhile, trains us to remain present, to observe without judgment, and to respond rather than react to life's challenges. Together, these philosophies provide a powerful framework for practicing self-love that is neither narcissistic nor indulgent, but rather grounded in wisdom, compassion, and genuine care for our holistic well-being. Self-love, seen through this lens, becomes not about constant pleasure or avoiding discomfort, but about treating ourselves with the same kindness and understanding we would offer a dear friend. The following 12 lessons interweave Stoic principles and mindfulness practices to guide you toward a sustainable, meaningful relationship with yourself. These are not quick fixes or temporary solutions, but lifelong practices that deepen with time and commitment. Each lesson offers practical ways to incorporate these principles into your daily life, allowing you to construct a foundation of self-love that remains steady even when external circumstances fluctuate. Remember, the journey towards self-love is not linear but cyclical. There will be days when these practices feel natural and others when they seem impossible. The Stoics would remind us that this, too, is part of the human experience, to be embraced rather than resisted. And mindfulness would encourage us to observe these fluctuations with curiosity rather than judgment. Let us begin this journey together, step by gentle step, toward a more compassionate relationship with ourselves and, by extension, with the world around us. Lesson 1. Embrace your humanity through imperfection. The Stoic view of human nature. The ancient Stoics understood a fundamental truth about being human. Imperfection is not just inevitable. It's intrinsic to our nature. Epictetus, who began life as a slave and became one of Stoicism's most influential teachers, often reminded his students that to err is not a deviation from human nature, but an expression of it. Remember, he taught, that you are an actor in a play which the director wants to be performed in a certain way. This perspective invites us to see our imperfections not as failures to be overcome, but as the very fabric of our humanity. When we make mistakes, act unwisely, or fall short of our ideals, we are not breaking some cosmic rule, but experiencing what it means to be human. Seneca, another prominent Stoic philosopher, wrote to a friend, "I am not a wise man and will not be one. I am making progress, but still far from a goal." This humble acknowledgement of our limitations is not resignation, but rather the first step toward true self-love. It relieves us from the impossible burden of perfection and allows us to embrace our whole selves, flaws, mistakes, and all. Mindful acceptance of all that you are. Mindfulness practice reinforces this Stoic perspective by teaching us to observe ourselves without judgment. When we sit in meditation and notice our wandering thoughts, physical discomforts, or emotional turbulence, we practice simply acknowledging what is present without immediately trying to fix or change it. This non-judgmental awareness creates space between our experiences and our identity. Your thoughts are not you. Your emotions are not you. Your mistakes are not you. You are the consciousness that observes these phenomena as they arise and pass away. When we bring this mindful awareness to our imperfections, something remarkable happens. Rather than being consumed by self-criticism or endless striving for improvement, we can hold our flaws with gentle curiosity and compassion. This doesn't mean we abandon growth or responsibility, but rather that our efforts toward improvement stem from self-acceptance rather than self-rejection. Practical daily application. Begin each day with a simple affirmation that acknowledges your humanity. Today, I may make mistakes, feel difficult emotions, and encounter my limitations. This makes me not less than human, but fully human. When you notice self-criticism arising, pause and place a hand on your heart. Breathe deeply and say to yourself, "This is a moment of suffering. Suffering is part of life. May I be kind to myself in this moment." Keep a humanity journal where you record moments when you or others displayed perfectly imperfect humanity. These might include mistakes, moments of vulnerability, or instances when you had to adjust your expectations. Reflect on these not as failures, but as expressions of your authentic human experience. Practice the common humanity reflection from self-compassion research. When facing difficulty, remind yourself, "This is hard right now. Many others have felt this way too. I'm not alone in this experience." The deeper wisdom. The paradox at the heart of this lesson is that accepting our imperfections actually facilitates our growth more effectively than harsh self-criticism. Psychologists have found that self-compassion, treating ourselves with the same kindness we would offer a good friend, leads to greater motivation, emotional resilience, and even higher standards of excellence than self-judgment. When we embrace our humanity through imperfection, we release the exhausting need to present a flawless image to the world. We conserve the energy previously spent on self-criticism and direct it toward meaningful growth. Most importantly, we discover that our worthiness of love and belonging was never contingent on perfection in the first place. As Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, reminded himself, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment." Similarly, our distress about our imperfections comes not from the imperfections themselves, but from our judgment that they make us unworthy or unlovable. This judgment, like any other, is within our power to change. Embracing our humanity through imperfection is perhaps the most fundamental act of self-love, as it grants us permission to be exactly who we are while still aspiring toward who we might become. Lesson 2. Distinguish between what you can and cannot control. The dichotomy of control as self-love. At the heart of Stoic philosophy lies a deceptively simple principle known as the dichotomy of control. Epictetus introduces this concept in the very first lines of his Enchiridion. Some things are within our control, while others are not. Within our control are our opinions, pursuits, desires, and aversions. In short, whatever is of our own doing. Outside our control are our body, property, reputation, status. In short, whatever is not of our own doing. This distinction, when internalized, becomes one of the most profound acts of self-love we can practice. Why? Because much of our suffering stems from expending emotional energy on circumstances beyond our influence, while neglecting what we genuinely can change. When we focus on what we cannot control, we place our well-being in external hands. We become like a leaf blown about by every wind, our peace contingent on favorable circumstances. This creates not only anxiety, but a fundamental disconnection from our own agency and power. Conversely, when we direct our attention to what is within our control, our judgments, responses, intentions, and efforts, we reclaim sovereignty over our inner experience. This is not about resignation, but about wise discernment of where to invest our precious life energy. Mindful discernment in daily life. Mindfulness practice offers us the tools to apply this Stoic principle moment by moment. Through mindfulness, we develop the capacity to pause between stimulus and response, creating a space in which we can ask, "Is this within my control? If not, can I practice acceptance? If yes, what response aligns with my values?" This pause is crucial because our default tendency is often to react automatically, either futilely, trying to control the uncontrollable, or passively accepting what we could actually influence. Mindfulness helps us detect when we're falling into either trap. The practice of mindful discernment involves not just intellectual understanding, but embodied awareness. We learn to recognize how attachment to outcomes beyond our control manifests as physical tension, racing thoughts, or emotional reactivity. Similarly, we notice how focusing on what we can control, our own intentions, attention, and actions, brings a sense of groundedness and clarity. Practical daily application. Begin each morning with a brief reflection on the day ahead, mentally categorizing anticipated situations into within my control and outside my control. For those outside your control, practice mentally letting go, while setting clear intentions for how you'll respond to what is within your control. Create a physical reminder of this principle, perhaps a small stone or object you carry in your pocket. When you feel yourself becoming anxious or frustrated, touch this object and ask yourself, is what I'm concerned about within my control? If not, can I practice acceptance? Practice the sphere of control meditation. Visualize yourself at the center of a circle that represents what you can control: your thoughts, judgments, efforts, responses. Outside the circle lies everything beyond your control. As concerns arise, mentally place them either within or outside your circle, responding accordingly. When facing a challenging situation, ask 3 questions. What aspects of this can I control? What aspects are beyond my control? And how can I focus my energy on what I can influence while accepting what I cannot? Develop a personalized mantra based on Epictetus's wisdom. In my control, my responses, my efforts, my intentions. Beyond my control, others' opinions, external outcomes, past events. I choose to focus on what I can influence. The deeper wisdom. The dichotomy of control is not about passivity or detachment from life, but about strategic investment of our energy and attention. It's a recognition that our most valuable resource, our internal state, belongs to us alone, and no external circumstance can claim it without our consent. This principle holds profound implications for self-love. Many of us have been taught that self-worth is contingent on external achievements, others' approval, or certain life circumstances. The dichotomy of control liberates us from these false measures, anchoring our sense of value in what is truly ours, our character, intentions, and efforts. Moreover, this principle protects us from the twin pitfalls of excessive self-blame and victimhood mentality. We learn to take responsibility for what is genuinely ours to control while releasing the burden of what isn't. This balanced perspective fosters resilience and equanimity in the face of life's inevitable fluctuations. As we practice this discernment, we often discover that our circle of influence is larger than we initially perceived. While we cannot control others' actions, we can control how we communicate, set boundaries, and respond. While we cannot control life circumstances, we can control how we prepare, adapt, and learn. The dichotomy of control, properly understood, doesn't diminish our agency but clarifies it, directing our energy toward where it can be most effective. This clarity is itself an act of self-love, a recognition that our peace and well-being are too precious to be squandered on futile attempts to control the uncontrollable. Lesson 3. Transform your inner dialogue with virtuous self-talk. The Stoic practice of self-examination. The ancient Stoics were pioneers in recognizing the power of internal dialogue. Seneca advised, "We should every night call ourselves to account. What infirmity have I mastered today? What passions opposed? What temptation resisted? What virtue acquired?" Similarly, Marcus Aurelius wrote his Meditations as a series of personal exhortations, a conversation with himself aimed at living more virtuously. This tradition of self-examination differs markedly from modern self-criticism. The Stoics didn't engage in punitive self-judgment, but rather in honest reflection guided by philosophical principles. Their goal was not self-flagellation, but self-improvement through clear-sighted awareness. For the Stoics, virtuous self-talk meant addressing oneself with both candor and dignity. It meant acknowledging mistakes without condemnation and recognizing progress without pride. This balanced dialogue treated the self neither as an enemy to be conquered nor as an idol to be worshipped, but as a respected companion on the journey toward wisdom. Mindful awareness of thought patterns. Mindfulness practice extends this Stoic tradition by helping us observe our self-talk with greater clarity. Through mindfulness, we learn to recognize thoughts as mental events rather than absolute truths, creating crucial distance between ourselves and our inner narratives. Research in cognitive psychology confirms what mindfulness practitioners have long observed. Our thoughts significantly influence our emotions and behaviors. When our self-talk is harsh, punitive, or catastrophizing, it triggers stress responses that impair both our well-being and our effectiveness. Conversely, balanced, realistic, and compassionate self-talk supports emotional regulation and wise action. Mindful awareness allows us to catch unhelpful thought patterns before they spiral. We notice when self-talk shifts from productive reflection to destructive rumination, from accurate assessment to distorted judgment. This awareness is the first step toward transformation. Practical daily application. Begin a dialogue journal where you record your self-talk in challenging situations. Review these entries with curiosity rather than judgment, asking, is this how I would speak to someone I deeply respect? Does this perspective reflect wisdom or merely habit? Practice the third-person perspective exercise borrowed from both Stoicism and modern psychology. When facing difficulty, refer to yourself by name or in the third person. For example, instead of thinking I'm failing at this, try, your name is finding this challenging right now. This subtle shift promotes self-compassion and constructive problem-solving. Create a personal collection of philosophical prompts drawn from Stoic wisdom. Examples might include, is this within my control? What virtue is called for in this moment? How would my wisest self respond? Use these prompts to redirect unhelpful self-talk toward more constructive patterns. Implement the thought labeling practice. When you notice self-critical thoughts, silently label them as criticism. When you notice catastrophizing, label it fear story. This creates space between you and the thought, allowing you to respond rather than react. Develop a daily premeditation of adversity. Premeditatio malorum each morning. Briefly envision potential challenges and rehearse responding to them with constructive self-talk. This Stoic practice builds resilience and prepares your inner dialogue for difficult moments. Practice self-directed loving-kindness phrases adapted to Stoic values. May I act with wisdom today. May I remember what is and isn't in my control. May I respond to difficulties with virtue. May I be patient with my progress. The deeper wisdom. Transforming our self-talk involves not just changing the content of our thoughts, but our relationship to thinking itself. The Stoics recognized that we are not merely passive recipients of our thoughts, but active participants in their creation and perpetuation. This realization is profoundly empowering. It suggests that through deliberate practice, we can cultivate an inner dialogue that serves rather than sabotages our well-being and growth. We can develop what psychologists now call metacognitive awareness, the ability to think about our thinking and redirect it toward greater wisdom. Importantly, virtuous self-talk is not about toxic positivity or denial of difficulties. The Stoics were realists who acknowledged life's challenges unflinchingly. Similarly, mindfulness teaches us to see things as they are, neither better nor worse. Virtuous self-talk means addressing reality with clarity while maintaining the dignity and respect we would accord any valued companion. This balanced approach creates a virtuous cycle. As our self-talk becomes more constructive, our actions align more closely with our values. As our actions improve, our self-talk naturally becomes more affirming. As our self-talk grows more affirming, our capacity for wise action expands further. Perhaps most importantly, transforming our inner dialogue changes our experience of being alive. As Epictetus noted, people are disturbed not by things, but by the views they take of them. When we cultivate virtuous self-talk, we gradually shift our perception of ourselves, others, and life itself, finding tranquility and meaning even amid life's inevitable challenges. Lesson 4. Practice present moment awareness as self-respect. The Stoic art of living in the present. While the Stoics are known for their rational approach to life, they shared with many wisdom traditions a profound appreciation for present moment awareness. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, do not disturb yourself by picturing your life as a whole. Instead, ask yourself what nature demands of you now, and then do that. Similarly, Seneca observed that many people lose the day in expectation of the night, and the night in fear of the dawn. For the Stoics, dwelling in past regrets or future anxieties represented not just psychological suffering, but a fundamental misallocation of our most precious resource, our attention. They recognize that the present moment is the only time in which we can actually exercise virtue, make choices, and experience life directly. Past and future exist only as mental constructs, useful for learning and planning certainly, but not places to dwell. This temporal focus wasn't merely philosophical theory, but practical wisdom. The Stoics understood that when our attention is fragmented across time, our capacity for wise action in the present is diminished. present moment awareness, then becomes an act of self-respect, a recognition that our limited time and attention deserve to be fully inhabited rather than squandered on rumination or worry. Mindful embodiment in daily life. Mindfulness practice offers concrete methods for cultivating this present moment awareness. At its core, mindfulness training teaches us to anchor our attention in direct sensory experience, the breath, bodily sensations, sounds, or other perceptual anchors. These anchors exist only in the present, creating a natural pathway back to the here and now. Contemporary research confirms what mindfulness practitioners have long observed. The human mind wanders approximately 47% of waking hours, and this mind-wandering correlates with decreased happiness. When we're lost in thought about the past or future, we miss the life that's unfolding now, a subtle but profound form of self-disrespect. Embodied presence offers an alternative. By learning to inhabit our sensory experience with friendly curiosity, we discover that the present moment contains a richness that conceptual thinking alone cannot access. Colors become more vivid, textures more intricate, emotions more nuanced. We taste our food rather than merely consuming it. We feel the warmth of connection rather than merely exchanging words. Practical daily application. Create presence triggers throughout your day. Specific activities that serve as reminders to return to the present moment. For example, each time you touch a doorknob, feel the sensation and take one conscious breath. Each time you wash your hands, notice the temperature and texture of the water. These micro-practices accumulate into a habit of presence. Practice the 5 senses check-in. Several times daily, pause and notice 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. This simple exercise anchors you firmly in present sensory experience. When transitioning between activities, implement a brief mindful pause. Take 3 conscious breaths, feel your feet on the ground, and set an intention for how you wish to engage with the next activity. This prevents attention residue from one task bleeding into the next. During conversations, practice listening with your whole being rather than mentally preparing your next response. Notice when your mind wanders and gently return to the speaker's words, facial expressions, and the shared field of attention between you. Schedule regular tech-free zones in your day. Periods when screens are set aside and you engage directly with your environment, activities, or companions. Even brief tech breaks can reset your attention and deepen your connection to the present. Develop the habit of asking yourself throughout the day, where's my attention right now? Is it where I want it to be? This meta-awareness helps you reclaim your attention when it has wandered without your conscious choice. The deeper wisdom. Present moment awareness as self-respect goes beyond mere attention management. It represents a fundamental shift in how we relate to our experience. When we're fully present, we cease treating the current moment as merely instrumental, something to get through on the way to some future satisfaction. Instead, we recognize that life unfolds exclusively in a series of present moments, each valuable in its own right. This shift addresses what psychologists call the arrival fallacy, the mistaken belief that happiness awaits us once we reach some future goal or circumstance. The Stoics recognized this fallacy, with Seneca noting that true happiness is to enjoy the present without anxious dependence upon the future. Present moment awareness also fosters a healthier relationship with discomfort. When we're fully present with difficult emotions or sensations, we often discover that they're more bearable than our thoughts about them would suggest. Rather than amplifying discomfort through rumination or avoidance, we can meet it directly with curious attention. Perhaps most profoundly, present moment awareness reconnects us with our inherent wholeness. When we drop the mental narratives about who we should be or what we lack, we discover the fundamental completeness that exists prior to thinking. This doesn't negate the value of growth and aspiration, but grounds them in acceptance of what is already here. As we cultivate present moment awareness as a form of self-respect, we gradually shift from living in our conceptual maps of reality to inhabiting the territory of direct experience. This shift brings a sense of aliveness, authenticity, and peace that no amount of past-focused or future-oriented thinking can provide. Lesson 5. Cultivate virtue as the foundation of self-worth. The Stoic understanding of virtue. For the Stoics, virtue, arete in Greek, wasn't primarily about moral rigidity, but about human excellence, the fullest expression of our nature as rational social beings. They identified four cardinal virtues: wisdom, the knowledge of what is good, bad, or indifferent; courage, steadfastness in the face of fear; justice, fairness in our dealings with others; and temperance, moderation and self-discipline. The revolutionary aspect of Stoic ethics was their insistence that virtue alone is sufficient for happiness, eudaimonia. External goods like wealth, status, or even health, while preferred, were considered ultimately indifferent with respect to one's true flourishing. This perspective placed the foundation of self-worth entirely within one's control, dependent not on circumstances or others' opinions, but on the quality of one's character and choices. As Epictetus taught, make the best use of what is in your power, and take the rest as it happens. This meant focusing one's energy on developing virtue, rather than chasing external validation or circumstantial advantages. For the Stoics, true self-love meant honoring this internal locus of value by striving for excellence in character regardless of external rewards or recognition. Mindful alignment with values. Mindfulness practice complements this Stoic emphasis on internal virtue by helping us observe the gap between our stated values and our actual behaviors. Through mindful awareness, we notice when we're acting from habitual patterns, social conditioning, or emotional reactivity rather than from our deepest values. Contemporary mindfulness programs often incorporate values clarification exercises, encouraging practitioners to identify their core values and notice how these might differ from societal expectations or unconscious goals. This process reveals that much of our discontent stems not from lacking external goods, but from living out of alignment with our authentic values. When we act in accordance with our values, whether those include honesty, compassion, creativity, or courage, we experience what psychologists call values congruence, a state associated with greater well-being, resilience, and sense of meaning. Conversely, when our actions contradict our values, we experience internal conflict and diminished self-respect. Practical daily application. Create a personal virtue journal, where you regularly reflect on how you've expressed the cardinal virtues, or your own defined core values, in daily life. Focus not just on major decisions, but on seemingly small choices that reflect character. How you responded to frustration, whether you spoke truth when silence would have been easier, how you treated those who could offer you nothing in return. Practice values-based decision-making by pausing before significant choices and asking, which option better expresses my core values? Which will allow me to look in the mirror with greater self-respect, regardless of the outcome. Implement a daily virtue review inspired by Seneca's practice. At day's end, ask yourself questions like, how did I express courage today? Where did I show wisdom? In what ways did I act with justice and temperance? Where might I improve tomorrow? Create if-then plans for situations that typically challenge your values. For example, if I feel tempted to speak dishonestly to avoid discomfort, then I will pause, take a breath, and remind myself that integrity is more important than temporary ease. Practice the future self-reflection. Visualize yourself at the end of your life, looking back with satisfaction on a life well lived according to your values. What qualities and actions would make you proud? Let this vision guide your present choices. Develop a personal motto or maxim that encapsulates your core values and recite it at crucial decision points. For example, courage over comfort, truth before convenience, or character matters more than circumstances. The deeper wisdom. Cultivating virtue as the foundation of self-worth represents a radical departure from contemporary messages about self-value. Many modern approaches suggest that self-worth should be unconditional, that we should affirm our value regardless of our actions. While this perspective offers an important correction to performance-based worth, it may miss something essential about human nature. The Stoic approach suggests that genuine self-respect is earned through living according to our highest values, that we respect ourselves most deeply when we act in ways that merit respect. This doesn't mean harsh self-judgment or perfectionism, but rather the natural satisfaction that comes from expressing our best selves. Importantly, this approach places self-worth within our control. If our sense of value depends on external validation or achievement, we remain perpetually vulnerable to circumstances and others' opinions. But when worth is grounded in virtue, in the quality of our choices and character, it becomes unassailable. No external circumstance can diminish the value of a person who consistently acts with wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. This is not to suggest that virtue is easy or that we should expect perfection from ourselves. The Stoics themselves emphasize progress rather than perfection, with Seneca acknowledging, "I am not a wise man, I am still on the journey." The focus is on the sincere effort to align with virtue, not flawless execution. Ultimately, cultivating virtue as the foundation of self-worth brings coherence to our inner and outer lives. Rather than compartmentalizing self-love as something separate from our actions in the world, this approach integrates them. Our kindness toward ourselves becomes inseparable from our kindness toward others. Our respect for our own dignity extends naturally to respect for others' dignity. In this way, virtue-based self-worth avoids both the pitfalls of narcissistic self-absorption and those of self-negating sacrifice. It offers instead a middle path where caring for our character simultaneously benefits ourselves and others, where self-love and love for humanity are recognized as two expressions of the same fundamental value. Lesson 6. Embrace voluntary discomfort as self-care. The Stoic practice of voluntary hardship. At first glance, voluntary discomfort might seem antithetical to self-love. Yet the Stoics recognize that deliberately embracing mild hardship serves not as self-punishment, but as profound self-care. They called this practice voluntary hardship ascesis, and it formed a cornerstone of their practical philosophy. Seneca, despite his wealth, regularly practiced periods of simple living. He explained, "Set aside now and then a number of days during which you will be content with the plainest of food, with coarse and rough clothing, and will say, 'Is this what I feared?'" Similarly, other Stoics recommended practices like cold showers, simple meals, or uncomfortable physical training, not from ascetic self-denial, but from practical wisdom about human psychology. The Stoics understood a truth modern psychology has only recently rediscovered. Our discomfort tolerance directly impacts our freedom and resilience. When we habitually avoid discomfort, we become increasingly vulnerable to any circumstance that might cause it. Our comfort zone shrinks, and with it, our autonomy. Conversely, when we voluntarily engage with manageable discomfort, we expand our capacity to face life's inevitable challenges with equanimity. Mindful engagement with discomfort. Mindfulness practice offers tools for working skillfully with discomfort, rather than immediately reacting to unpleasant sensations with aversion or avoidance. Mindfulness teaches us to meet discomfort with curious, non-judgmental awareness. We learn to distinguish between physical sensations, emotional reactions, and the narratives we construct about our experience. Research in psychology and neuroscience confirms that our relationship with discomfort significantly influences how we experience it. When we resist or catastrophize discomfort, we amplify its intensity and duration. When we approach it with acceptance and curiosity, we often discover that it's more bearable than anticipated and less overwhelming than our thoughts suggest. This mindful approach doesn't glorify suffering, but rather develops a wiser relationship with the inevitable discomforts of human existence. It's about neither indulgence nor punishment, but about strategic engagement with challenge for the sake of greater freedom and resilience. Practical daily application. Begin with small, manageable practices of voluntary discomfort. Take a cold shower for the last 30 seconds of your regular shower. Wait a few minutes before scratching an itch. Delay checking your phone when you feel the urge. With each practice, observe not just the physical sensation, but your relationship to it. Practice comfort zone expansion by regularly doing something that causes mild social discomfort. Perhaps striking up a conversation with a stranger, speaking up in a meeting, or asking for a small discount. Notice how tolerance for social discomfort expands your choices and opportunities. Implement intermittent fasting or simplified eating for short periods. Beyond potential physical benefits, observe how this practice affects your relationship with hunger, cravings, and food-related impulses. Try the inconvenience yourself challenge. For 1 week, choose the stairs instead of the elevator, walk or bike instead of driving short distances, or use manual tools instead of electric ones. Notice how small inconveniences build physical capacity and mental resilience. Practice digital discomfort by designating regular periods of technological disconnection, perhaps no screens after dinner, a social media-free weekend, or a full day without your phone each month. Observe how this affects your attention, anxiety levels, and sense of agency. Engage in regular physical training that involves some level of discomfort, whether strength training, running, cold water swimming, or another challenging activity. Focus not just on physical outcomes, but on the mental discipline developed through consistent practice. The deeper wisdom. Embracing voluntary discomfort as self-care represents a nuanced middle path between hedonism and asceticism. It acknowledges that while pleasure is natural and appropriate to seek, a life organized exclusively around comfort ultimately leads to fragility and limitation. Modern psychology supports this ancient wisdom. The concept of anti-fragility, introduced by Nassim Nicholas Taleb, describes systems that actually benefit from stressors, volatility, and randomness, becoming stronger rather than merely resilient. Our physical and psychological systems display this quality when exposed to appropriate levels of stress followed by recovery. This perspective transforms how we view self-care. Rather than defining self-care exclusively as soothing activities or indulgences, we recognize that sometimes the most caring action we can take for ourselves involves temporary discomfort in service of long-term well-being. Just as physical training stresses muscles to stimulate growth, psychological training, through voluntary discomfort, builds our capacity to face life's challenges. Importantly, voluntary discomfort is not about self-punishment or valorizing suffering for its own sake. The Stoics were clear that the goal was not pain itself, but the freedom that comes from knowing we can handle difficulty. As Epictetus put it, it is not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Voluntary discomfort helps us develop the inner resources to react wisely. This practice also offers profound social and ethical benefits. When we're less afraid of discomfort, we can make choices based on our values rather than convenience. We can stand up for what's right even when it's difficult, speak truth even when silence would be easier, and act with generosity even when it requires sacrifice. In this way, embracing discomfort doesn't just strengthen us individually, but enhances our contribution to the collective good. Perhaps most fundamentally, voluntary discomfort reminds us that our peace and well-being don't depend on perfect circumstances. We discover through direct experience that we can be okay, even thrive, amid conditions we might once have considered intolerable. This discovery dramatically expands our freedom and reveals a deeper resilience than we might have imagined possible. Lesson 7. Practice gratitude through negative visualization. The Stoic art of negative visualization. Among the most powerful Stoic practices for cultivating appreciation was what they called negative visualization, premeditatio malorum. This exercise involved regularly contemplating the potential loss of what we value, imagining life without loved ones, health, possessions, or capabilities we currently enjoy, far from being morbid or pessimistic. This practice was designed to counter the human tendency toward hedonic adaptation, our remarkable ability to quickly take for granted whatever good fortune we have. As Epictetus advised, when you are delighted with anything, be delighted as with a thing which is not one of those which cannot be taken away. By mentally rehearsing the temporary nature of all we cherish, the Stoics found that we paradoxically enhance our ability to appreciate these blessings in the present moment. The practice creates a healthy psychological distance from what we have without actually losing it, allowing us to see with fresh eyes what familiarity has rendered invisible. Mindful appreciation of impermanence. Mindfulness traditions similarly emphasize contemplation of impermanence as a pathway to gratitude and presence. Lesson 8. Honor your body as a gift, not a possession. The Stoic perspective on the body. The Stoics maintained a nuanced view of the body that differs from many contemporary perspectives. They considered the body a preferred indifferent, something that, while not constituting our essential worth, is nevertheless valuable and worthy of care. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself to honor the body, even while recognizing that physical well-being was ultimately not within his complete control. This perspective challenges both modern extremes: the view of the body as a project to be endlessly perfected, and the neglect of bodily needs in favor of intellectual or spiritual pursuits. The Stoics understood that while we are more than our bodies, we experience life through our embodiment, making our physical vessels worthy of respectful stewardship. For the Stoics, this meant neither indulgence nor asceticism, but a middle path of appropriate care. They advocated for moderation in food and drink, regular physical exercise, and sufficient rest, not primarily for aesthetic reasons or even longevity, but because these practices supported their capacity for virtue and rational action in the world. Mindful embodiment and self-care. Mindfulness practices extend this Stoic perspective by teaching us to inhabit our bodies with kind awareness rather than judgment or dissociation. Through practices like the body scan meditation, mindful movement, and mindful eating, we learn to experience our bodies directly rather than through the filter of conceptual thinking. This direct experience reveals an important truth. The body is not primarily an object to be evaluated, but a process to be experienced, a continuous flow of sensations, needs, and capabilities that constitute our physical existence. When we relate to the body as process rather than object, we naturally adopt a more compassionate and responsive approach to its care. Mindful embodiment also helps us distinguish between genuine self-care and self-improvement disguised as care. True self-care arises from a compassionate recognition of our needs and limitations, while much of what passes for self-care in contemporary culture is actually driven by implicit messages of inadequacy or social comparison. Practical daily application. Begin each day with a brief body gratitude practice. Before rising from bed, mentally scan your body and acknowledge 3 functions or capabilities you're grateful for. Perhaps your heart's reliable beating, your lungs' ability to breathe, or your legs' capacity to carry you through the day. Focus on function rather than appearance. Practice intention setting before physical activity. Rather than exercising primarily to change your body's appearance, set intentions focused on how you want to feel during and after movement. Perhaps energized, strong, clear-minded, or peaceful. Notice how this shifts your experience of activity from obligation to opportunity. Implement regular body listening, pauses throughout your day. Set a timer for brief intervals, and when it sounds, check in with your body's current needs. Are you thirsty, tense, needing movement, or rest? Respond to these needs with the same care you would offer a respected friend. Practice mindful consumption by pausing before eating or drinking to ask yourself, what does my body actually need right now? What would feel nourishing on multiple levels? Sometimes this might mean choosing nutrient-dense foods. Other times it might mean enjoying a treat with full presence and without guilt. Create a personal movement menu with diverse options that honor your body's changing needs. Some days might call for vigorous exercise, others for gentle stretching, still others for rest. Having multiple options helps you respond appropriately rather than forcing the same approach regardless of circumstance. Develop a sensory pleasure practice where you intentionally engage your senses in non-harmful ways. Perhaps savoring a piece of fruit with full attention, feeling the warmth of sunlight on your skin, or listening deeply to music you love. This practice reminds you that embodiment offers continuous opportunities for appreciate the gift of being alive. The deeper wisdom. Honoring the body as a gift rather than a possession represents a profound shift in our relationship with embodiment. When we view the body primarily as a possession, we tend to relate to it as an object to be controlled, improved, or displayed. This perspective often leads to dissatisfaction, as the body inevitably changes in ways that don't conform to our desires or societal standards. Conversely, when we recognize the body as a gift, something entrusted to our care rather than owned by us, we adopt a more grateful and responsive approach. We shift from trying to force the body to conform to our expectations to working collaboratively with its inherent wisdom and limitations. This collaboration fosters a deeper sense of integration between mind and body, reducing the sense of alienation many experience in relation to their physical selves. This perspective also helps us navigate the universal experience of bodily change and decline with greater equanimity. The Stoics were realistic about the body's vulnerability to aging, illness, and injury, Yet they maintain that these physical changes need not diminish our capacity for virtue or inner tranquility. When we honor the body as a gift rather than identifying with its temporary condition, we can face physical challenges with dignity rather than despair. Importantly, this approach doesn't exclude appropriate medical care or reasonable efforts to maintain health. Rather, it transforms the spirit in which these efforts are undertaken. Instead of pursuing health from a place of fear or vanity, we do so from gratitude for the gift of embodiment and recognition of our responsibility to care for what has been entrusted to us. This shift in perspective extends to how we view others' bodies as well. When we recognize our own embodiment as a gift rather than a possession, we naturally extend the same reverence to others, seeing beyond superficial appearances to the dignity inherent in all forms of embodiment. This fosters a more compassionate and inclusive vision of human physical diversity. Perhaps most profoundly, honoring the body as a gift connects us to something larger than ourselves. Whether understood in spiritual terms as a gift from a divine source or in naturalistic terms as the gift of evolutionary processes, our embodiment represents something we received rather than created. This recognition naturally evokes gratitude and humility, a sense of being part of something greater than our individual existence. Lesson 9. Build resilience through philosophical reflection. The Stoic practice of philosophical journaling. For the Stoics, philosophy was not merely abstract theorizing, but a practical discipline for navigating life's challenges. Central to this practical philosophy was a habit of reflective writing, a practice exemplified by Marcus Aurelius, whose meditations were originally private notes to himself, reminding him of philosophical principles during difficult times. This tradition of philosophical journaling served several purposes. First, it helped solidify abstract principles through concrete application to specific situations. Second, it created a record of insights that could be revisited during times of stress or confusion. Third, it provided a space for honest self-examination without the performative aspects that might color conversations with others. Perhaps most profoundly, honoring the body as a gift connects us to something larger than ourselves. Whether understood in spiritual terms as a gift from a divine source or in naturalistic terms as the gift of evolutionary processes, our embodiment represents something we received rather than created. This recognition naturally evokes gratitude and humility, a sense of being part of something greater than our individual existence. Lesson 9. Build resilience through philosophical reflection. The Stoic practice of philosophical journaling. For the Stoics, philosophy was not merely abstract theorizing, but a practical discipline for navigating life's challenges. Central to this practical philosophy was a habit of reflective writing, a practice exemplified by Marcus Aurelius, whose meditations were originally private notes to himself, reminding him of philosophical principles during difficult times. This tradition of philosophical journaling served several purposes. First, it helped solidify abstract principles through concrete application to specific situations. Second, it created a record of insights that could be revisited during times of stress or confusion. Third, it provided a space for honest self-examination without the performative aspects that might color conversations with others. At its core, Stoic journaling was about building resilience through clarity of thought, about training the mind to interpret events in ways that promoted equanimity rather than emotional reactivity. As Epictetus taught, it is not events that disturb people, it is their judgments concerning them. Philosophical reflection helps us identify and modify these judgments. Mindful reflection and cognitive reframing. Modern mindfulness practices complement this Stoic tradition by teaching us to observe our thoughts without immediately identifying with them. Through mindfulness, we develop the capacity to notice unhelpful interpretations as they arise and create space for more balanced perspectives. This approach aligns with contemporary cognitive behavioral psychology, which emphasizes the relationship between thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. Research confirms that how we interpret events significantly impacts our emotional responses and subsequent actions. By cultivating awareness of our interpretive patterns and deliberately practicing alternative perspectives, we can build psychological flexibility and resilience. Mindful reflection differs from ordinary rumination in several important ways. Where rumination tends to be repetitive, and unproductive. Mindful reflection involves curious exploration of experience with the intention of gaining insight. Where rumination often increases distress, skillful reflection helps us metabolize difficult experiences into wisdom. Practical daily application. Begin a daily philosophical reflection practice where you spend 10 to 15 minutes writing about a recent challenging situation through the lens of Stoic principles. Use prompts such as, what aspects of this situation are within my control and which aren't? What virtues might help me respond more effectively? How might I view this situation from a broader perspective? Create a personal philosophical library of quotes or principles that resonate with you. During difficult moments, select one that seems particularly relevant and explore how it applies to your current situation. Write about how this principle might change your perception or response. Practice cognitive distancing through writing exercises where you identify a troubling thought, then explore different perspectives on it. For example, I notice I'm thinking that this setback means I'm a failure. Is this thought necessarily true? What other interpretations might be possible? What would I say to a friend in this situation? Implement a weekly lessons learned reflection where you review your experiences over the past week and identify what they've taught you. Focus particularly on challenges and how you responded to them. What went well? What might you approach differently next time? What insights can you carry forward? Create a perspective shift journal where you regularly practice viewing situations from different temporal or social perspectives. For example, ask yourself, how might this look 1 year from now? How might someone with different life experiences view this? What would the wisest person I know say about this? Develop a values clarification practice where you regularly reflect on how your actions align with your core values. When you notice misalignment, explore what led to it and how you might bridge the gap between your ideals and your lived experience. The deeper wisdom. Building resilience through philosophical reflection represents a profound act of self-love, one that acknowledges both our capacity for growth and our need for supportive internal dialogue. Unlike superficial forms of positive thinking that deny difficulties, this practice engages realistically with challenges while maintaining faith in our ability to respond wisely. This approach recognizes that resilience is not about avoiding difficulty, but about developing the internal resources to face it with equanimity. Just as physical strength develops through resistance training, psychological resilience grows through mindfully engaging with challenges rather than avoiding them. Philosophical reflection provides the conceptual tools for this engagement. Importantly, this practice isn't about imposing rigid interpretations or denying authentic emotions. Rather, it's about expanding our repertoire of perspectives beyond those that reflexively arise from habit or conditioning. We learn to ask, is this the only way to see this situation? What other interpretations might be available? Which perspective serves my deepest values and long-term well-being? This expansion of perspective naturally leads to greater emotional flexibility. We become less trapped in automatic reactions and more capable of responding to situations with wisdom. This doesn't mean our initial emotional responses disappear. The Stoics recognize that these first movements of emotion are natural and beyond our immediate control. Rather, we develop the capacity to hold these reactions in mindful awareness without being dominated by them. Perhaps most profoundly, philosophical reflection helps us transform suffering into meaning. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist who survived Nazi concentration camps, observed that suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds a meaning. Through reflective practices, we learn to extract wisdom from difficulty, to identify how challenges contribute to our growth, and to recognize the deeper patterns and purposes that may be served by our experiences. In this way, building resilience through philosophical reflection becomes not just a coping strategy, but a pathway to deeper self-understanding and meaning. We develop not just the ability to withstand difficulty, but to be transformed by it, to emerge from challenges with greater wisdom, compassion, and clarity about what truly matters in a life well lived. Lesson 10. Practice mindful speech as self-respect. The Stoic discipline of assent. The Stoics place great emphasis on mindful speech, considering it a direct expression of our rational nature and a powerful shaper of both our inner state and our relationships. They recognize that words, once spoken, cannot be unspoken, and that hasty or careless speech often leads to regret. This attention to speech fell under what the Stoics called the discipline of assent, the practice of carefully examining impressions before accepting them as true and acting upon them. Epictetus advised, "Make it your practice to tell every harsh truth if necessary, with kindness, and in your own person, and at the right time." For the Stoics, mindful speech wasn't primarily about social politeness, but about internal integrity. They recognized that how we speak reflects and reinforces our character. When we speak with honesty, kindness, and wisdom, we strengthen these qualities within ourselves. Conversely, when we speak rashly, dishonestly, or unkindly, we weaken our moral character and diminish our self-respect. Mindful communication in relationships. Mindfulness practice extends this Stoic wisdom by helping us observe the internal processes that precede speech, the thoughts, emotions, and intentions that ultimately shape our words. Through mindfulness, we develop the capacity to notice when we're about to speak from reactivity rather than wisdom, and to pause before words become actions. Contemporary research in relationship psychology confirms the importance of this pause. Studies show that how we communicate, especially during conflict, strongly predicts relationship satisfaction and longevity. The ability to speak mindfully, with presence, clarity, and compassion, contributes significantly to relationship quality and personal well-being. Mindful speech involves not just what we say, but how we listen. When we bring full attention to others' words, without immediately planning our response or filtering what we hear through our preconceptions, we create space for genuine understanding and connection. This quality of listening is both a gift to others and a form of self-respect, an acknowledgement that our relationships deserve our full presence. Practical daily application. Practice the think framework before speaking, especially in charged situations. Ask yourself, is what I'm about to say true, helpful, inspiring, necessary, kind? This simple checklist can prevent many regrets and foster more meaningful communication. Implement a mindful pause practice. Before important conversations or when emotions are running high, take 3 conscious breaths and check in with your intention. What outcome are you hoping for? What values do you want to embody in this interaction? This brief pause can transform the quality of your communication. Practice reflective listening in conversations. After someone shares something significant, paraphrase what you heard before responding with your own thoughts. This simple practice ensures you've understood correctly while giving the other person the gift of feeling truly heard. Create a vocabulary of values for expressing difficult truths or emotions. For example, learn to say, "I feel concerned," rather than "you're being reckless," or "I need space," rather than "you're suffocating me." This precision in language helps maintain connection even during challenging conversations. Implement a no-gossip practice for 1 week, noticing how this affects your speech habits and relationships. When tempted to speak about someone not present, ask yourself, would I say this if they were here? What need am I trying to meet through this conversation? How else might I meet that need? Practice gratitude expression by regularly sharing specific appreciations with others. Rather than generic compliments, offer detailed observations about what you value in them. Notice how this practice affects both your relationships and your own attention to the positive, the deeper wisdom. Practicing mindful speech as self-respect represents a profound recognition that our words matter, not just in their effects on others, but in their reflection of who we are. When we speak with integrity, clarity, and compassion, we honor not only our listeners, but also ourselves. We affirm through our actions that we value truth, connection, and wisdom. This approach challenges both the impulse toward careless speech and the tendency toward strategic dishonesty. It recognizes that while momentary gain might come from manipulation or people-pleasing, the long-term cost to our self-respect is too high. As Epictetus noted, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak. Lesson 11. Find freedom through acceptance of reality. The Stoic practice of amor fati. One of the most profound Stoic teachings is encapsulated in the phrase amor fati, love of fate. This doesn't mean passive resignation to whatever happens, but rather a radical acceptance of reality as it is. combined with a determined focus on responding virtuously to whatever circumstances arise. Epictetus articulated this principle in his famous prayer. Don't seek for everything to happen as you wish it would, but rather wish that everything happens as it actually will. Then your life will flow well. This perspective recognized that much of our suffering comes not from events themselves, but from the gap between reality and our expectations or desires. For the Stoics, this acceptance wasn't about abandoning aspirations or efforts to improve our situation. Rather, it was about distinguishing between what we can and cannot control, and bringing our will into alignment with reality rather than fighting against it. They understood that we waste enormous energy resisting what has already occurred instead of focusing on our response to it. Mindful acceptance in the present moment. Mindfulness practice similarly emphasizes acceptance of present moment reality as a pathway to freedom. Through mindfulness, we learn to meet our experience as it is, pleasant or unpleasant, desired or unwanted, without adding the additional suffering of resistance, judgment, or denial. Research in psychology confirms the wisdom of this approach. Studies show that acceptance-based interventions effectively reduce symptoms of anxiety, depression, and chronic pain. Paradoxically, fully accepting difficult emotions often allows them to move through us more quickly, while resistance tends to intensify and prolong them. This acceptance differs markedly from resignation or passivity. It's not about giving up, but about starting from an honest recognition of what is. As the saying goes, you can't start from where you're not. Acceptance provides the firm ground of reality from which effective action can spring. Practical daily application. Practice the reality check exercise when facing disappointment or frustration. Pause and explicitly acknowledge what is actually happening, without judgment or elaboration. For example, my flight is delayed rather than this is terrible and will ruin everything. Notice how this simple acknowledgement often reduces emotional reactivity. Implement a daily weather report practice where you check in with your internal state, thoughts, emotions, physical sensations, without trying to change anything. Simply notice and name what's present, the way you might observe weather patterns. As the Stoics understood, this perspective doesn't diminish our capacity for action, but rather enhances it. When we accept reality as it is, we work with the grain of existence rather than against it. Our actions become more effective because they're based on clear perception rather than wishful thinking or denial. We discover that true freedom lies not in having everything go our way, but in finding equanimity and purpose regardless of external circumstances. Lesson 12. Cultivate benevolence as the highest form of self-love. The Stoic understanding of human nature. The Stoics recognized a fundamental truth about human well-being that modern psychology has only recently rediscovered. We are inherently social creatures whose flourishing is inextricably linked to the well-being of others. As Hierocles, a Stoic philosopher, described it, each person exists within concentric circles of concern, self, family, friends, community, and eventually all of humanity. Rather than viewing self-love and love for others as competing interests, the Stoics saw them as mutually reinforcing. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "What benefits the hive benefits the bee." They understood that genuine self-interest, properly understood, includes concern for others' welfare because we are fundamentally interconnected. For the Stoics, benevolence, active goodwill toward others, was not just a moral virtue, but a pathway to personal flourishing. By expanding our circle of concern beyond our immediate self-interest, we participate in something larger than ourselves and discover a deeper sense of meaning and connection. Mindful compassion practice. Mindfulness traditions extend this Stoic wisdom through formal practices that cultivate compassion for self and others. These include loving-kindness meditation, metta, compassion practices, karuna, and tonglen, the practice of taking in others' suffering and sending out relief. Research in neuroscience and psychology confirms that these practices produce measurable benefits for practitioners, including increased positive emotions, reduced stress hormones, enhanced immune function, and greater social connection. Remarkably, these benefits often appear even when compassion is directed towards strangers or difficult people. This research suggests that our brains are wired for connection and benevolence. When we act from compassion, We activate neural pathways associated with positive emotion and social bonding. Conversely, excessive self-focus often correlates with depression, anxiety, and diminished well-being. Practical daily application. Begin each day with a brief circle of concern practice. Visualize sending goodwill first yourself, then to loved ones, then to neutral people in your life, then to those you find difficult, and finally to all beings. Use simple phrases like, may you be well, may you be safe, may you live with ease. Practice micro moments of connection throughout your day. Make eye contact with strangers, offer genuine smiles, express gratitude to service workers, or briefly check in with colleagues about their well-being. These small acts of benevolence create a continuous current of goodwill that benefits both giver and receiver. Implement a weekly kindness practice, where you perform one deliberate act of benevolence without expectation of recognition or return. This might involve volunteering, making a donation, helping a neighbor, or simply being fully present with someone in need. Create a difficulty practice for challenging relationships. When interacting with someone you find difficult, silently remind yourself, like me, this person wishes to be happy and free from suffering. Like me, this person has known joy and pain. Notice how this recognition of shared humanity shifts the quality of your interaction. Practice benevolent attention by intentionally noticing others' positive qualities and contributions. Make it a habit to acknowledge these specifically, either silently or aloud. This practice counters our negativity bias and fosters appreciation and connection. Implement a daily interdependence reflection, where you consider how your well-being is supported by countless others. From those who produce your food and maintain your infrastructure to those who have shared knowledge and created art that enriches your life. This recognition naturally evokes gratitude and a sense of connection to something larger than yourself. The deeper wisdom. Cultivating benevolence, as the highest form of self-love, represents a profound shift from conventional understanding. It challenges the false dichotomy between caring for oneself and caring for others, revealing that these are not competing but complementary aspects of human flourishing. This perspective aligns with emerging research on what psychologists call eudaimonic well-being, happiness based not on hedonic pleasure but on meaning, purpose, and virtue. Studies consistently show that people who engage in pro-social behavior report greater life satisfaction and show objective markers of better health compared to those focused primarily on self-gratification. The practice of benevolence also addresses a common pitfall in self-love, the tendency toward self-absorption. When self-love becomes overly focused on meeting our own needs and preferences, it paradoxically becomes less satisfying and more anxiety-producing. We become trapped in an endless cycle of self-concern that actually undermines our well-being. Benevolence breaks this cycle by directing our attention outward in a constructive way. Rather than ruminating on our own problems or fixating on our desires, we engage with the needs and potential of others. This shift in attention doesn't neglect our own well-being, but rather places it in a broader context that gives it deeper meaning and sustainability. This approach also offers a powerful antidote to the isolation that pervades modern life. Despite unprecedented technological connectivity, many people report feeling lonely and disconnected. Benevolence practice directly counters this isolation by creating authentic connections based on mutual care rather than utility or convenience. Perhaps most profoundly, cultivating benevolence helps us transcend the illusory boundaries between self and other. As we extend our circle of concern, we begin to recognize that our well-being is inextricably linked to the well-being of others and of the larger systems in which we participate. This recognition doesn't diminish our individuality, but rather enriches it through meaningful connection to something larger than ourselves. As the Stoics understood, this expanded sense of self is not a sacrifice of personal interest, but its fulfillment. We discover that our deepest nature is relational, and that our greatest satisfaction comes not from accumulating private goods, but from contributing to collective flourishing. In this way, benevolence toward others becomes the most profound expression of love for ourselves, a recognition that we are part of something greater, and that our actions ripple beyond our individual boundaries in ways that ultimately return to enrich our own lives. Conclusion: integrating the path of Stoic self-love. As we conclude our exploration of Stoic and mindful approaches to self-love, it's worth reflecting on how these 12 lessons work together to create a coherent and sustainable practice. Each lesson addresses a different facet of our relationship with ourselves, yet all are interconnected aspects of a unified approach to living well. The Stoic path to self-love differs markedly from popular conceptions that often emphasize indulgence, affirmation regardless of action, or the pursuit of constant positive emotion. Instead, it offers something both more challenging and more deeply satisfying. A relationship with ourselves characterized by honesty, respect, and genuine care for our character and well-being. At its heart, this approach recognizes that true self-love cannot be separated from how we live. It's not primarily about how we feel about ourselves, but about how we treat ourselves through our choices, attention, and actions. It's about recognizing our inherent worth while simultaneously honoring our capacity for growth and virtue. The integration of Stoic philosophy with mindfulness practice provides both conceptual wisdom and practical tools for this journey. Stoicism offers clear principles for distinguishing between what matters and what doesn't, for responding to life's challenges with virtue rather than reactivity, and for finding tranquility amid uncertainty. Mindfulness provides concrete practices for developing present-moment awareness, for observing our experience without judgment, and for cultivating compassion toward ourselves and others. Together,